The Caltherian Empire had been the undisputed ruler of the galaxy for 12,000 years. That's longer than humans have had written language. In all that time, they had conquered over 4,000 different alien civilizations. Some had fought back. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had simply surrendered the moment the Caltherian warships appeared in their skies. It didn't matter which path they chose. The result was always the same. The Caltherians won. They always won. Now they had set their sights on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in what most galactic maps labeled as the middle of nowhere. The planet was called Earth, and according to every piece of intelligence the Empire had gathered, it would be the easiest conquest in their long history. Commander Ralthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the holographic display showing his fleet. 300 warships. Each one was massive, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust or boil its oceans. Each one carried thousands of soldiers and enough firepower to level entire continents. It was overkill for a species that hadn't even figured out how to leave their own solar system properly. The intelligence reports made for amusing reading. Humans had sent a few primitive probes to their neighboring planets. They had placed a couple of flags on their own moon using chemical rockets that were laughably inefficient. They had some satellites floating around their planet for communication and observation. That was it. By Caltherian standards, they were still crawling around in the dirt. What made it even more pathetic was that humans couldn't even get along with each other. The planet was divided into hundreds of different nations, all competing, all arguing, all pointing weapons at each other instead of working together. Ralthos had seen this pattern before. Divided species fell the fastest. They spent so much time fighting among themselves that they never saw the real threat coming until it was too late. The Armada had traveled for weeks through faster-than-light corridors to reach this backwater system. When they finally dropped back into normal space at the edge of the solar system, Ralthos felt almost disappointed. This wasn't going to be a proper battle. It was going to be an execution. He activated the communication systems and broadcast the standard message that the Empire sent to all new targets. His voice echoed across every radio frequency, every communication channel that humans used. The message was simple and had been translated into all major human languages. Surrender now. Submit to the Empire. You have one full rotation of your planet to comply. After that, the fleet would begin the bombardment. Resistance was futile. Defiance meant death. Ralthos expected the usual response. Sometimes primitive species tried to send messages back, begging for more time, asking why this was happening, offering whatever pitiful resources they had. Sometimes they launched their primitive weapons in a desperate last stand. Sometimes their governments collapsed into chaos as panic spread among their population. But they always responded. Fear made people do that. Fear made them react. But from Earth there was nothing. No panic transmissions. No attempted communication. No desperate pleas or threats or offers of negotiation. The sensors showed that human civilization was still functioning normally down there. Their cities still had power. Their communication networks were still active. Their satellites were still operational. But nobody was responding to the Armada that had just appeared at their doorstep. Ralthos found this strange. In 200 years of military service, he had never encountered a species that simply ignored a Caltherian invasion fleet. He checked the communication systems twice to make sure the message had been transmitted properly. It had. Every human with a radio or television or computer had received it. They knew the Armada was here. They just weren't reacting. Maybe they were in shock. Maybe their primitive minds couldn't process the scope of what was happening. Maybe they thought it was some kind of joke or hoax. Ralthos didn't particularly care what they were thinking. He gave the order for the fleet to advance deeper into the solar system, moving past the orbit of the outermost planets. The warships moved in perfect formation, a sight that had made thousands of species surrender before a single shot was fired. Surely when the humans saw this massive fleet getting closer, saw these city-sized warships approaching their homeworld, they would break their silence. They would understand that this was real. They would understand that their time was running out. The fleet passed the gas giants. Still no response from Earth. They crossed the asteroid belt. Still nothing. They moved past the red planet that humans called Mars. The blue planet was clearly visible now, hanging in space like a fragile ornament. And still the humans said nothing. Ralthos felt a tiny flicker of unease, though he would never admit it to his crew. This wasn't normal behavior. Every species had survival instincts. Every species reacted to threats. But the humans were acting like the most powerful invasion force in the galaxy was just another Tuesday for them. He ordered the fleet to maintain course and prepare all weapon systems. Maybe the humans were just stupid. Maybe they really didn't understand what was about to happen to them. Well, they were about to learn. The hard way. The Caltherian fleet had just crossed the orbit of Mars when something impossible happened. One moment, the space in front of the Armada was empty. The next moment, there was a ship there. It hadn't flown in from anywhere. It hadn't dropped out of faster-than-light travel. It had simply appeared like someone had flipped a switch and decided that a ship should exist in that exact spot. Commander Ralthos stared at the readings on his display. The vessel was small. Laughably small. It was barely bigger than the personal shuttles his officers used to travel between ships. There were no visible weapons on its hull. No missile ports, no energy cannons, no defensive turrets. His sensors couldn't detect any shields around it either. It was just a plain, smooth craft hanging in space between his massive armada and the planet Earth. Then the communication came through. The voice spoke in perfect Caltherian, with the proper grammar and even the correct military formality. That was impressive, Ralthos had to admit. Most species took years to learn Caltherian properly. But what the voice said was far from impressive. Turn back. You are not welcome here. That was it. No explanation. No threats. Just a simple statement delivered in a tone that sounded almost bored, like the speaker was reading from a shopping list rather than addressing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The human identified himself as Captain James Mitchell, and he spoke like he was commenting on the weather rather than staring down 300 warships. Ralthos actually laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that made several of his bridge officers flinch. This was ridiculous. A single tiny ship, appearing out of nowhere, telling an Imperial Armada to turn around? The sheer audacity of it was almost entertaining. Almost. Destroy that vessel, Ralthos ordered, still chuckling. He pointed at one of his destroyer captains. Use the main cannon. Let's show these humans what happens when they get in our way. The destroyer, a warship that was itself larger than most cities, turned its primary weapon toward the small human craft. The plasma cannon began charging, energy building up to levels that could vaporize an entire city block in a fraction of a second. Every species in the galaxy knew what Caltherian plasma weapons could do. The technology had ended countless wars before they even began, simply because the destructive power was so overwhelming that resistance seemed pointless. The weapon fired. A brilliant beam of superheated plasma, hotter than the core of a star, crossed the distance between the destroyer and the human ship in an instant. It was the kind of weapon that left nothing behind. Not debris, not vapor, not even atoms. Just empty space where something used to be. The beam hit the human vessel dead center. Ralthos expected to see it simply vanish in a flash of light. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Nothing happened. The ship didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It didn't even show a scorch mark where the beam had struck it. The plasma, carrying enough energy to destroy a city, simply washed over the hull like water over stone and then dissipated into space. The small craft just sat there, completely undamaged, as if it had just been splashed by a gentle rain rather than hit by one of the most powerful weapons in the known galaxy. Fire again. Ralthos shouted. His amusement had vanished, replaced by confusion and the first stirrings of concern. Full power. Continuous beam. The destroyer fired again, this time maintaining the beam for a full 5 seconds. Enough energy to level a continent poured into that one small ship. The space around it lit up so bright that the bridge displays had to dim automatically to prevent the crew from being blinded. When the light finally faded and the weapon powered down, the human vessel was still there. Still intact. Still completely unmarked. Before Ralthos could issue another order, before he could even begin to process what he was seeing, the human ship did something. There was no visible weapon firing. No energy beam. No missile launch. His sensors didn't pick up anything at all. No power surge, no energy signature, nothing that indicated any kind of weapon system activating. The destroyer simply disappeared. One moment it was there, a massive warship with a crew of 500 and enough firepower to conquer a small planet. The next moment there was just empty space. Not debris. Not an explosion. Not the signature of a ship jumping to faster-than-light travel. The destroyer and everyone on it had simply ceased to exist, as if they had been erased from reality itself. The bridge fell completely silent. Every officer stared at their displays, checking and rechecking their sensors, trying to understand what had just happened. Ralthos felt his hands gripping the command console so hard that his claws were leaving marks in the metal. In 200 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. It violated everything he understood about warfare, about physics, about how the universe worked. Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communication channel again. The tone was exactly the same as before. Still calm. Still almost bored. Like making a warship vanish from existence was just another routine part of his day. Last warning. Turn back. Ralthos opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in his long military career, he had no idea what to say. He was staring at a tiny ship that had just destroyed one of his warships without even appearing to try. And the human captain sounded like he was doing Ralthos a favor by giving him another chance. The commander looked at his fleet on the holographic display. 299 ships now. He had just lost a destroyer and 500 crew members, and he didn't even know how it had happened. The small human craft hung in space, waiting for his response, and suddenly Ralthos wasn't so sure this was going to be an easy conquest anymore. Commander Ralthos had not risen to his position by being a coward. He had conquered worlds. He had faced enemies that fought with desperate courage. He had stared down species that refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. He was a warrior of the Caltherian Empire, and warriors did not back down from challenges. But he was also not stupid, and what he had just witnessed made no sense at all. Pride, however, was a powerful thing. The loss of one destroyer could be explained away somehow. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe the humans had gotten incredibly lucky with some kind of experimental weapon. Maybe his crew had made an error. Whatever the explanation, Ralthos could not let this stand. If word got back to the Empire that a single human shuttle had made him retreat, his career would be over. His reputation would be destroyed. No, he needed to show overwhelming force. He needed to prove that nothing could stand against the Caltherian military. Sector assault formation, he commanded, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. 50 ships. Target that vessel. I want simultaneous firing on my mark. Maximum power to all weapons. 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of destruction, turned their weapons toward the small human craft. Plasma cannons charged. Missile tubes loaded. Energy weapons hummed with building power. This wasn't a single shot from one destroyer. This was enough combined firepower to crack a continent in half. This was the kind of assault that could reshape a planet's surface. Nothing could survive it. Nothing. Fire. The space around the human ship exploded with light. 50 different weapons discharged at exactly the same moment, their combined energy output creating a miniature star. The brilliant flash was so intense that every ship in the fleet had to activate emergency filters on their viewing screens. The energy readings were off the scale. Enough heat and force to turn solid rock into vapor, to boil oceans, to tear through any known defensive technology. The assault continued for 10 full seconds. 10 seconds of continuous, overwhelming destruction being poured into a single point in space. When Ralthos finally gave the order to cease fire, he was certain that there would be nothing left. Not even atoms. Just empty space and the fading radiation from the attack. The light faded. The energy dissipated. And the human ship was still there. Not damaged. Not even marked. It hung in space exactly as it had before, as if the last 10 seconds of apocalyptic firepower had been nothing more than a gentle breeze. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. More ships appeared. Not just one or two. Dozens of them materializing around the Caltherian fleet like ghosts stepping out of thin air. Then hundreds. Each one identical to the first. Each one small and unmarked and absolutely untouched by anything the Caltherians could throw at them. They appeared in a loose sphere around the entire armada, not threatening, not aggressive, just there. Waiting. Watching. Ralthos felt his heart rate spike. His species didn't feel fear the way humans did, but they understood the concept of a predator recognizing a bigger predator. And right now, his 300 warships were surrounded by vessels that had just demonstrated they were completely immune to everything the Empire could do. His strategic computer systems, designed to calculate battle outcomes and suggest optimal tactics, were running through scenarios automatically. Ralthos watched the projections flickering across his screen. Attack Pattern 1, total fleet loss. Attack Pattern 2, total fleet loss. Defensive Formation Alpha, total fleet loss. Retreat Formation, uncertain outcome, probable fleet loss. Every single scenario, every possible tactic that his systems could devise, ended the same way. His fleet would be destroyed. Not defeated. Not damaged. Destroyed. In 200 years of military service, Ralthos had never seen his strategic systems show a 0% chance of victory. Never. Not once. Even against overwhelming odds, there was always some small possibility of success, some narrow path to survival. But the computers were telling him something he didn't want to believe. His fleet was already dead. They just hadn't fallen down yet. He opened a communication channel to the nearest human vessel. His voice was rough when he spoke. "What are you?" The response came from a different voice this time. A woman who identified herself as Lieutenant Rebecca Walsh. She sounded young, her tone professional but with an edge of something that might have been sadness. Or maybe pity. "We are not what your intelligence suggested, Commander. Your scouts observed us 5,000 years ago when we were indeed primitive. When we were still fighting with sticks and stones and barely understood fire. But we do not advance slowly. We never did. You see chemical rockets because that's what we let you see. You see a single moon colony because that's all we wanted you to find. You see divided nations fighting each other because we allowed you to believe we were weak." Ralthos felt something cold spreading through his chest. 5,000 years. The Caltherian scouts had visited Earth 5,000 years ago and reported a species that was barely intelligent. That report had been the basis for all the Empire's intelligence about humans. But 5,000 years was nothing. Most species took tens of thousands of years to develop space travel. Some took hundreds of thousands. How could humans have gone from primitive to this in just 5,000 years? "You're lying," Ralthos said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No species advances that quickly." "We do," Rebecca Walsh replied simply. "We always have. It's what makes us human. We adapt. We learn. We improve. And we don't like bullies, Commander. We especially don't like bullies who destroy civilizations for sport." One of Ralthos's subcommanders, a younger officer named Vector, was panicking. Ralthos could see it on his face. The officer's hands were shaking. His eyes were wide. Fear was taking over his rational mind. And then, before Ralthos could stop him, Vector did the worst possible thing. He opened fire. A full squadron under Vector's command, 10 warships, launched everything they had at the nearest cluster of human vessels. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams flashed. It was a desperate, terrified attack from someone who had just realized he was completely outmatched. The human ships didn't even move to dodge. They didn't need to. 100 Caltherian warships simply vanished. Not the ones that had fired. Different ones scattered throughout the fleet. They disappeared in the same way the first destroyer had, as if someone had simply decided they didn't exist anymore. 100 ships. 50,000 crew members. Gone in less time than it took to blink. The bridge fell into absolute silence. Even Vector, who had started this, was staring at his console in horror at what his panic had caused. Ralthos looked at his fleet display and saw that he now had only 199 ships left. He had started this day with 300. And the humans hadn't even seemed to try hard. "Stop." Ralthos's voice cracked as he broadcast on every frequency his communication system could reach. "Stop. Cease fire. All ships stand down immediately." His hands were shaking as he gripped the command console. He had just watched 100 warships disappear like they had never existed. 100 ships. 50,000 Caltherians, soldiers who had families waiting for them back home, warriors who had trained their entire lives for service to the Empire. Gone. Just gone. And the humans had done it so casually, so effortlessly, that it was clear they hadn't even been trying hard. The disappearances stopped. The human ships remained motionless around the Caltherian fleet, silent and waiting. Ralthos took a moment to steady his breathing. His species didn't experience fear the way humans did, but what he felt now was something close to it. Terror mixed with the horrible understanding that he was completely powerless. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, the force that had conquered thousands of worlds, was nothing but targets waiting to be erased. A new voice came through the communication channel. This one was different from the others. Deeper, older, carrying the weight of authority. The human identified himself as Colonel David Parker, and when he spoke, it was with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "We could eliminate your entire fleet before you could blink, Commander. Every ship you have. Every soldier under your command. We could do it right now and there's nothing you could do to stop us. More than that, we could trace your trajectory back through space. We could find your homeworld. We could do to your entire empire what we just did to those 100 ships. We have that capability. We've had it for a very long time." Ralthos felt something cold crawl down his spine. But it wasn't the threat that disturbed him most. It was what Parker said next. "But we don't operate that way. We're giving you a choice, Commander Ralthos." The fact that they knew his name made his blood turn to ice. He had never transmitted his identity. His name wasn't in any communication they had intercepted. Yet they knew exactly who he was. Which meant they had been inside his systems. They had read his files, his records, probably everything about him and his crew. And he had never detected a thing. No alarms, no warnings, no sign of intrusion at all. How long had they been watching? How much did they know? The questions spiraled through his mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Colonel Parker continued, his voice taking on a different tone. Not threatening now but almost sad. Like he was remembering something painful. Humanity spent 10,000 years killing each other, Commander. 10,000 years of war. We fought over land, over resources, over ideas and beliefs. We invented thousands of ways to hurt each other. We got very, very good at it. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, climate collapse. We came so close to extinction that you can't even imagine it. Ralthos listened, unable to speak. This wasn't what his intelligence reports had said. They had described humans as primitive, barely unified, still struggling with basic space travel. Not a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times and somehow survived. When we finally did reach the stars, Parker went on, when we finally had the technology to go out into the galaxy, we made a decision as a species. We swore that we would never become what we had fought against for all those thousands of years. We would never be conquerors. We would never enslave other species. We would never destroy civilizations just because we could. We would be better than what we had been. Pause. Then Parker's voice hardened slightly. But we also decided that we would never allow others to do those things in our presence. Not anymore. Not when we had the power to stop it. Something appeared in front of Ralthos. A holographic display transmitted directly from the human ships, bypassing all of his security systems like they didn't even exist. The image showed a map of the galaxy, and on it were thousands of star systems highlighted in red. Thousands. Each one representing a world that the Caltherian Empire had conquered over 12 millennia of expansion. These civilizations, Parker said quietly, had families, Commander. They had children. They had art and music and stories. They had dreams about their future. They had cultures that had developed over millions of years. And you took that from them. The Caltherian Empire took it all and called it progress. Called it destiny. Called it bringing order to the galaxy. Ralthos stared at the map. He had never thought about it that way. Those worlds were just territories. Resources. Strategic positions. That was how he had been trained to think about them. That was how every Caltherian thought about them. The conquered species became part of the Empire. They served. That was the natural order of things. The strong ruled the weak. It had always been that way. We've been watching you for 5,000 years, Parker continued. Watching every world you crushed. Every species you enslaved. Every culture you erased. We watched and we learned everything about you. Your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. We could have stopped you at any time. We could have destroyed your empire centuries ago. But we waited. We wanted to be sure. We wanted to give you every possible chance to become something better on your own. The holographic map zoomed in, showing world after world, each with data scrolling beside it. Population numbers before conquest. Population numbers after. The differences were staggering. Billions of lives ended or enslaved. You didn't become better, Parker said. You got worse. More efficient. More ruthless. So we're done waiting. We're done watching. The age of empires built on conquest ends today, Commander Ralthos. Right here. Right now. Ralthos found his voice finally, though it came out as barely a whisper. You're going to destroy us. No, Parker replied, and there was something almost gentle in his tone now. We're offering you a choice. The Caltherian Empire can dissolve peacefully. You can release every world you've conquered. You can return to your own system and rebuild your civilization as something that doesn't require crushing others to exist. We'll help you do this. We'll provide resources, guidance, support. We understand what it's like to be a violent species trying to find a better path. We'll help you walk that path. And if we refuse? The silence that followed was answer enough. But Parker said it anyway, his voice flat and final. Then we remove you from the galaxy. Permanently. Every Caltherian ship. Every military installation. Every weapon. Gone. Your people will survive, but your empire won't. One way or another, Commander, your empire of conquest ends today. The only question is whether you choose to end it peacefully, or whether we end it for you. Ralthos stared at the holographic map floating in front of him, showing thousands of conquered worlds spread across the galaxy. Each red dot represented a civilization that the Caltherian Empire had crushed. Each one had been a living, breathing society with its own history. And the humans knew about every single one of them. They had been watching, learning, judging. You want us to relinquish the Empire? Ralthos asked, his voice hollow. Release every conquered world? That would mean the end of everything we've built. 12,000 years of expansion, of bringing order to the galaxy. Our entire civilization is built on. It would mean survival, a new voice interrupted. This one belonged to Major Emily Brooks, and her tone was firm but not cruel. Not mocking. Just stating facts. Your empire has two choices, Commander. Voluntary dissolution and reconstruction or involuntary erasure. Those are the only options on the table. We've been watching you for 5 millennia. We've watched you destroy worlds that could have become something beautiful. We've watched you take species that were just starting to reach for the stars and crush them back down into the dirt. We're done watching. We're done allowing it to continue. As she spoke, something started happening to Ralthos's fleet. Alarm systems began blaring across every ship. His officers were shouting reports, their voices overlapping in confusion and panic. The weapon systems were shutting down. Not damaged, not destroyed, just turning off. Energy cannons powered down. Missile tubes locked closed. Defensive shields flickered and died. Then the engines stopped. The massive drives that pushed the warships through space simply went quiet. The faster-than-light systems that allowed them to cross the galaxy became inert, their complex machinery refusing to function. Within seconds, every Caltherian warship in the fleet had become nothing more than a metal shell drifting in space. But the life support systems kept working. The oxygen generators hummed along. The temperature controls maintained comfortable levels. The water recyclers and food processors continued their operations. The humans had disabled everything that could be used as a weapon or for escape, but they had very carefully left everything that kept the crews alive. The message was clear. The Caltherians weren't in danger. They weren't going to suffocate or freeze or starve. They were just completely, utterly helpless. The humans could have killed them all in an instant, but instead they had simply taken away their ability to do harm. Captain Mitchell's voice returned to the communication channel. The same voice that had first warned them to turn back when this had all started. Back when Ralthos had still thought this would be an easy conquest. Mitchell's tone was gentle now, almost compassionate. Like a teacher explaining something to a student who was struggling to understand. We're not monsters, Commander. We understand what it's like to be a violent species trying to find its place in the universe. Humans were violent for most of our history. We were really good at hurting each other. We understand the temptation to use force to get what you want, to build empires, to dominate others because you can. We've been there. We've done all of that. Ralthos listened, unable to do anything else. His fleet was dead in the water. His crew was unharmed but powerless. Everything he had trained for, everything he had believed about Caltherian superiority, had been torn apart in less than an hour. We'll help you rebuild as something better, Mitchell continued. Peacefully. Your people won't be harmed. We're not going to punish your civilians for what your government did. We're not going to destroy your culture or erase your history. But your empire of conquest ends today. Right here, right now. No more invasions. No more enslaving other species. No more crushing civilizations because you decided they should serve you. Ralthos looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at their consoles, at the systems that no longer responded to their commands. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Most just looked defeated. They had come here expecting an easy victory, and instead they had encountered something so far beyond their understanding that resistance wasn't just futile, it was meaningless. He thought about the 12,000 years of Caltherian glory, the conquest, the expansion across the stars, the countless worlds that had been brought into the Empire, willingly or not. His species had believed they were bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. They had believed they had the right to rule because they were strong enough to take what they wanted. Then he thought about the 100 ships that had simply vanished. 50,000 Caltherians who would never go home. 50,000 families who would never see their loved ones again. And the humans had done that without even seeming to try. Without even raising their voice. What would happen if humanity decided that the Caltherian species itself was too dangerous to exist? What would happen if they decided that mercy was wasted on people who had spent 12,000 years crushing others? Ralthos realized, with a clarity that was almost painful, that his entire species existed right now only because these humans had decided to let them live. He opened a communication channel. Not to the human ships but back toward Caltherian space. Back toward the homeworld, where the High Council sat in their chambers believing that the conquest of Earth was proceeding according to plan. His hand was steady as he activated the transmission, even though he knew what this message would mean for his career. For his life probably. "This is Commander Ralthos of the 5th Conquest Fleet," he said, his voice clear and formal. "I am transmitting from Earth's solar system. The invasion has failed. I am recommending immediate and unconditional surrender to the human species, and full acceptance of their terms. He paused, knowing that what he said next would be recorded, analyzed, and probably used against him in a military tribunal. If there still was a Caltherian military after this. The humans are offering us something we never gave to any of the species we conquered. They're offering us mercy. They're offering us a chance to survive and rebuild as something better than what we are. They have the power to erase us from existence. They've demonstrated that capability. But they're choosing not to use it. They're giving us a choice. Another pause. Around him, his officers were watching. Some with approval. Some with disgust. All with the understanding that everything had changed. I strongly suggest we take it. Because the alternative is extinction and we would deserve it. He closed the channel and waited. Around the fleet, around the planet Earth, around the entire solar system, human vessels began appearing. Not dozens now. Not hundreds. Thousands of them, materializing from wherever they had been waiting. And beyond the solar system, according to the sensors that still worked, human ships were appearing throughout Caltherian space. Not attacking. Not destroying. Just appearing, making their presence known, making it clear that every corner of the Empire was now within their reach. The message spread across the galaxy faster than light. Carried by human technology that the Caltherians couldn't even begin to understand, the word went out to every species, every civilization, every world that had ever feared the Caltherian Empire. The age of conquest was over. The predators had met something bigger, something that refused to allow their behavior to continue. The Caltherian Armada that had come to conquer Earth became the first fleet in galactic history to surrender without firing a single effective shot. And it would be the last fleet that would ever need to, because humanity had just announced to the entire galaxy that the old rules no longer applied. There was a new power among the stars, and it had very different ideas about how civilizations should treat each other.